What's up, crackerjacks? Got some big boys for you today. Some tall boys, to be precise. This is a custom job that is a lot bigger than I expected. This is me demonstrating just how tall they are. They are up on dollies, but that is still quite bloody tall. I'll start by taking all of the knobs off. The owner is not certain at this point whether she wants to keep these knobs or if she wants to get new ones. So I'll hold on to them for now just in case. Because there are so many drawers on these things and I've learnt from my past mistakes, I am marking A on one and B on the other, and then I'll go through each drawer and mark them consecutively. You'd be surprised how even though everything looks identical, they might be slightly off between each drawer. Okay, so the look we're going for with these drawers is white, doing a test patch there, and we're going for a light timber top, so like a whitewash top. And I've decided that because of how tall these are, I want to do the underside, stain the underside as well, because I don't want that to be visible by anyone who might be shorter, or short enough to see under here anyway. It'll give it a nicer finish, I think. If it was lower down, I wouldn't bother and I'd just paint the underside and be lazy, but I want to stain the underside of that. And I don't like butting the sander up under here because A, it's hard to hold the sander up and under like that, and it also tends to leave dents or gouges along that edge, and I don't want that. So I had a quick look underneath, and sure enough, there are screws under here. Where's my hand? There and there, and screws along all around that edge. So I'm going to go ahead and detach the tops from these, but I'm going to mark them up first so that I know exactly where they go back. Okay, so just going to show you real quick, this is how I've marked up the inside. So this is where I'm looking at it from. I've put two X's there and a line on both sides there, and then that one there. I've made them all different so I know which way around it goes, which way is front, which way is back, just in case, and so that I can see from all angles where it lines up so I can find the screw holes. Probably don't have to do all of that, but you know, I like to make sure. I should also mention the other reason I'm taking them off to sand them is because I am a short ass. Could you imagine trying to sand these and get a nice finish on them with them sitting right up there? Absolutely not. Work smarter, not harder. Coming back to that test patch now, I'm using a chalk paint on this, and I don't often use chalk paint. Actually, I rarely use chalk paint, so I was a little apprehensive about this, but this is straight on top, no primer, and it's not scratching or leaving any marks, so I'm happy with this. I'll also not be scuff sanding this piece. That is a good way to end up with bleed through, and I'm doing white, so I just want to avoid it altogether. But there were a couple of spots in the factory finish that needed some attention. This seemed like the perfect opportunity for me to test out this little sanding doodad. It's just a itty bitty little palm sander thingy, or finger sander, or whatever you want to call it, with Velcro sanding sheets for it in 3 different grits. I think I got it on Temu, however you pronounce that, I'm not sure, don't care. And it worked perfectly for this, and I used it on a whole bunch of edges and stuff like that as well on these tall boys, and it worked an absolute treat. So I will be linking that in the description, blah blah blah. I am not affiliated with anything, so I don't get anything out of it. It's just a cool little thing that I thought other people might get a kick out of, or get use out of, whatever. As I said previously, scuff sanding a pre-existing or factory finish like this, where the wood is completely sealed in, can lead to bleed through. So I'm using Made by Paint Polyseal, which also doubles as a priming sealer, I think it is. I'm probably got that wording wrong, but I'm using it nonetheless to seal up any spots where I've had to sand it down slightly to clean up the pre-existing finish. This will just help to make sure any tannins are sealed back into the wood so that they don't show through in my nice white finish. I'm going to be using Made by Paint chalk and clay paint in the colour Aspen. This is their whitest white. It is very, very white. I also purchased this paint pouring thingy that helps keep your paint tins nice and clean and tidy, and it was really easy to use and really easy to clean afterwards, so best $8 I've ever spent. I'm only pouring out a small amount of paint for now because I'm going to be using the roller to roll all of my edges of the inside of the cabinet and the edges of the drawers, if that makes any sense. I'm doing things kind of back to front this time because I want to see how it goes. Usually when I'm spraying, I'd spray the front of the cabinet and then I'd either spray the edges and make a huge mess, or I would spray the fronts and then go in with a roller or a brush afterwards and do all the edges and stuff, and then make a mess of my nice, tidy, freshly painted and smooth sprayed parts. You follow? The idea here is that I go in and paint all of the edges first with a roller. That way I can be messy about it and just wipe that front edge, the front facing edges, back with my finger as I go, and it'll be nice and tidy, and then I'll just have to put the drawers back in and spray the whole thing, and then that's done. Now I needed to find something to cover this exposed top with, and my husband brought home this leftover roll of paper from his work where he sprays vehicles, and it just happened to be the exact right width for this. Whilst it doesn't matter a great deal, because once the drawers are in and the top is on, you won't be able to see the inside, so overspray doesn't really matter a great deal. I don't want to make a huge mess, and because the drawers are going to be in whilst I'm spraying, a lot of that paint could end up going into the inside of the drawers, and I don't want that. Now it's time to start spraying, and again, obviously I'm using Made by Paint Aspen, and one of the things I love about these tins is the abundance of instructions on it, and it's got their colour chart right there on the tin. Now you guys know how I'm always trying to remind you to filter your paint before you spray. What have I done wrong here? And it was at this point I realised I had stuffed up. Just wanted to take a quick moment to show you that by this point I have now got both sides of my neck done, so it is all done. But I'm thinking I might go back at some point and get the gaps between the moth and the flowers filled in to make it, you know, all tie in together a bit better. But I love it. I did not, however, consider how I was going to be able to wear my respirator whilst spraying. I tried. I really did try, but the strap was sitting right on the fresh tattoo. I'd literally had it done the day before, and it just wasn't going to work. Now, just in case anyone's wondering why that one side has a coat of paint on it, I literally had a little bit of paint left on my roller and didn't want to waste it after I was done going around doing all the edges. And so I was just like, yeah, cool, whatever. I'll roll it all off onto this side of the dresser so it's not wasted. I managed to get a full coat on that one side of the dresser just from leftover paint on the roller. Which brings me to why I opted for chalk paint. When I was trying to decide what paint to go for these tall boys and what white to choose, I decided to have a chat with Jade from Fuller's Flips. I will link her website in the description. She is all-knowing and absolutely amazing when it comes to everything Hampton style, and as we know, white is a big thing with Hampton styling, and she is the person to talk to when it comes to whites. Now, I originally told Jade that I was going to go for their mineral paint because I do prefer to work with mineral paints because it feels like less work not having to do a top coat on it, and I just really love the feel of their Made by Paint mineral paint. It has a really, really nice finish to it. But because I was going to need as much paint as I did for these two tall boys, Jade suggested that I use chalk paint instead of mineral paint because I will get more value for money. I am absolutely thrilled beyond words that I did go with the chalk paint because it was an absolute dream to work with. I think a lot of people are intimidated by chalk paint because they feel like it needs a lot more work than mineral paint, and there are certain aspects where I believe this is true. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about chalk paint because I haven't really used it a great deal except for in the past when I've done really like chippy rustic finishes. But this was an absolute dream to work with. It sprayed on so well and had such a smooth matte finish. It also has absolutely insane coverage. I mean, spraying you tend to get better coverage than you do with brushing or rolling, but even the parts where I rolled it on, the coverage was absolutely mental. I ended up doing, I think, 3 coats with the spray gun, and maybe a touch up here and there with a little brush on parts that I missed, but otherwise about 3 coats. And I left these because I was still concerned about tannin bleed showing through after a few days. I did leave them sit for about a week, and I came back and there was still no tannin bleed. Someone commented on one of my other videos recently telling me that I talk too much. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments if you think I talk too much. In this case, I think I have spoken too much, but I had a lot to tell you guys and I like talking about this stuff, so I just ran with it. And look at how pristine and crisp this white finish is now that it's all dry. It looks absolutely amazing and feels just as good. Now that it's time to seal the chalk paint, I am of course using Made by Paint Polyseal like I did earlier, and just like the chalk paint, it sprayed on so beautifully, cannot fault it at all. And because I'm doing so much bloody talking in this video, I'm just going to take a minute to discuss the Wagner spray gun that I'm using. I've been using this spray gun for a while now and I cannot fault it at all. It is absolutely amazing. I will link it in the description for anyone that's interested, and I cannot wait to add to my collection. All up, I did 2 coats of the Polyseal, sanding very lightly in between. Like you can see, I'm literally just wiping this sandpaper over the surface. Now, I did mention briefly on social media that I was going to be attempting this thing where I rolled the edges and then sprayed the outside. And a lot of people were curious to see if it was worth doing it that way and if it turned out any different, if it was easier, if it was harder, yada yada yada. I don't think it actually made a huge difference in the end. The only difference that it really made for me, in my opinion, was that I didn't have to worry about messing up the sprayed finish by, you know, dripping paint on it from the roller or accidentally like having paint spill over the edge of the edge. I'm not wording very well. Was it worth doing? I think so. I think I'll do it again in the future to decide whether I want to make it how I do things permanently. But yeah, it did turn out well. Now it's time to get these tops done. I would ordinarily sand through all of this finish or scrape some of it and then sand the rest, but because my wrists are getting worse and my knuckles are getting worse, I am opting to avoid power sanding as much as possible. So that means paint stripper. I don't have any cheap brushes on hand to spread this out, and I don't want to run out and buy any, so I'm using a plastic scraper or a plastic spatula to spread this out, and it actually worked really well and spread it out really evenly, and I didn't end up with a paintbrush full of paint stripper, so there wasn't really any wastage. covering it in cling wrap or cling film or saran wrap, or whatever you guys want to call it. This stops it from drying out and allows it as much time as possible to penetrate that finish so that you can take off as much as possible. After giving it all a thorough cleaning, I went in with 80 grit sandpaper and then went down to 120 grit, and then I think after that it was 240 grit. I ended up finishing on 400 grit sandpaper. I am no wood expert, but when I'm dealing with pine like this, I finish on a higher grit sandpaper before sealing it or staining it or anything like that, because pine tends to have bigger pores or bigger grain or more open grain than something like oak. So it will absorb more of that stain, so I like to finish with a tighter grain. The whitewash I'll be using on this piece is Pureco Staining Glaze in the colour Whisper. I am also using the Pureco applicator sponge to do this. I've used it in the past and worked really well, so I am using it again. I think everyone has their own way that they like to use things like this. In my case, I like to use my misting bottle to spray the sponge a little bit so that it's damp, and then dip it in the stain and glaze or whatever you're using, and then just wipe it on. Wipe it back and forth, long strokes, making sure to lift the sponge off instead of just coming to a complete stop. And yeah, it's pretty foolproof. Just make sure you rinse it out as soon as you're done so that it doesn't get all crusty. I've kept mine in a Ziploc bag for several months and I'm still using it. And for the stain and glaze, I ended up going in with, I think it was 2 coats overall. The owner has since made a decision in regards to what handles are going to be used and has decided to stick with the handles that they came with for now, whilst they have a look around and see if there's something else they prefer better. As per usual, a quick reminder of what we started off with. As always, everything can be found in the description, so if you have any questions, please check there first. If you can't find what you're looking for, feel free to comment or shoot me a message on social media. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.